see my screen? It should say, "Does solar make sense?"
Yes, I can see it.
All right. Okay, good, good, good. So now I'm going to do this whole presentation, and Chris, if you want to start the recording, um, as if I'm talking to a buddy of mine. We're sitting here having some iced tea, and I am not a lawyer. I don't play one on TV. I'm not a doctor. I am an electrical engineer. Um, I've done a couple of solar systems here at my place and a few others for friends. I understand all the pieces, but this is something that, this is my prerequisite that says, don't take everything I say for gospel, go do it, um, and then come back and sue me. This is more kind of guidelines and helping you to understand how these things work.
Okay.
And
Um, I have the chat window open on my screen in case somebody has questions. I think the best thing is if they put a question in the chat window, then we can get
okay,
to it in order and in a way that makes sense.
okay, my screen is full screen, so if you can let me know when there's questions. And let me add this: this is going to be a pretty quick thing if it's just me talking. So when you have questions, anyone, just jump right in. If you want to do the chat or if you want to unmute and chat that way. Um, but this is definitely kind of a give and take conversation because everyone has their own different ideas and goals and resources and so forth. Um, so you'll like my subtitle there. And if you hear barking or mooing or buzzing, it's my dogs, cows, or bees. Um, but my subtitle, hug your wallet, not a tree. I am not a save the world person. This is really presented more as what makes financial sense, um, for doing solar setups. Okay. So I'm going to start with kind of trying to break some of these stereotypes that people have. Um, first, while I'm saying this is do it yourself, a couple things can heal you, such as electricity and both AC, DC, as well as, gravity. I love falling. I hate landing. Gravity can kill you too. So anything we talk about, have some confidence in what you're doing. Like a couple of my buddies, they did all of the labor of welding and setting up and painting and putting screws in. And when it came to the electrical connection, I went over and connected those things up. Just, I know what I'm doing, and it's much safer, especially when you get to the 240 side. And by the way, the DC side was coming off your solar panels. Nowadays, we'll hook that up as 3, 4, 500 volts DC, and that can ruin your day as well. Um, there are people who think that, when you go solar, you're doing tremendous things for the environment, and I'm going to squash that. When you look at the mining that it takes to make the silicon and the aluminum and the glass and your copper and all those things, by the time you add it all up, it's kind of like electric cars where they may be good in one way, but they cause massive problems in the other way. The lithium batteries, the lithium mines in the world are horrific, environmentally speaking. So, I'm not going to try and sell those things because honestly, I'm not sure they're quite true. The next thing, and this might break some hearts, but I'm going to say it anyways, when you, when you especially drive around neighborhoods, everyone throws the solar panels on the roof. And in my opinion, that is the absolute worst place. Matter of fact, you might do better having them in the basement than putting them on your roof. The reason is we all spend big bucks, and I don't know if anyone's replaced the roof lately, um, having something over our house that doesn't leak water. Well, go and do solar, and you're going to put 100 holes into that waterproof roof of yours. And whether it's 10 years or 20 years from now, you're going to have to replace that roof. And at that point, it's going to cost you as much to take down your solar, do the roof, and then put it back up as you would have saved in the next 10 or 20 years. So I'm much more of and there's a bunch of other ways of mounting, and I'll talk about some of that later. Again, the electrical connections, um, absolutely know what you're doing when it comes to that stuff. Even if you have to hire an electrician for a couple hours, if you're not confident in it, just don't take those risks. The next thing is, a lot of people think, oh, you do the solar and you walk away and you never touch it. Well, that's not quite true. Um, there are now the good thing is it's about as low of a maintenance as you're going to get for any kind of power source, other than just writing a check to the electric company. But panels go out, inverters go out, squirrels chew wires. Just yesterday, I found that I've got 6 towers out back, and one of them's only putting out about half of what it should be. And it's like, all right, gonna have to go fight that thing. Um, so while it's fairly low maintenance, it is definitely not a no maintenance system. So I just wanted to kind of set expectations. Other things people think is that you get 12 hours of sun a day. That one solar panel will run your electric dryer, and we can get into some of those kind of factors later. Okay, now this is the big one. If you want to have a heart attack, um, call a solar panel installer and get a quote from them. Most of those guys, and these are the honest ones, um, they're going to, if you look at the cost of your materials, just the materials, and then you look at what they would charge you, it's going to be a 4x or 5x difference. That's a lot of labor, and I'll put some numbers to that later, but it could be tens of thousands of dollars. Now, that labor is not just sitting here and crocheting. You're lifting, you've got to use tools, drills, wires. You're lifting and gluing and threading, and you're going to say some words that you really shouldn't. But work is work, and you can hire individuals to do that work, or you can hire the company that does everything and charges you just at incredible rates. Also, whether you're doing installed or do it yourself, your electric company, they learned a while back that they've got to have rules, because if your solar panel is operating when the grid is down, their linesman comes and tries to fix something, it can kill them. And that's very bad for everybody. So electric companies have kind of put in a number of requirements, and they're slowly evolving. But some of them are like, and when I did my first setup versus what I helped someone with earlier this year, by me, it's Blue Bonnet Electric. That's the local electric company. I'm in Lockhart, a little bit south of Austin. And one thing they've added is you have to have a red handle disconnect no less than 6 feet, no more than 10 feet away from your meter box. And it's like, well, at my buddy's place, it was actually 4.5 feet away, and they said, nope, can't do that. You got to move that extra 18 inches, which sounds silly, but one thing you'll find is that safety guys have the negotiation and adjustment and flexibility of steel in winter. Of course, they want to know that when their grid goes down, that your system will not put any power onto the grid. There's some interesting things about breaker panels, and let me explain this. And for instance, my buddy just went through this. He has 200 amp service, so that's what comes from the meter can into his main breaker, which is 200 amps. He put in enough solar, and I can't remember, I think he had a 60 or 70 amp breaker on the solar. And that was in that breaker box. Well, and then at the bottom, it continues out to his house. Well, the electric company didn't accept that, because in theory, your house could be consuming the 200 amps from them plus, let's say 60 amps from his solar. So that box would be passing 260 amps through it. Now, he could turn on every device in his house and then some, and he still wouldn't get there. But that doesn't matter. We had to there's a few different ways to attack that. And one of them is to drop your main breaker from 200 to 150. And when we did that, his 200 amp box was sufficient, because otherwise they're going to make him upgrade the box, and that was going to be about a $400 or $500 just the materials I was going to do it for him. So what you're going to find is, while they have zero flexibility, you can get creative in terms of how you solve problems, without, spending $1,000 on silly stuff. And there's a standard called UL 1741, and that covers a number of these different features. But basically it means when the grid goes down, you're completely isolated, separated, and you're not going to do anything that would injure alignment. And a lot of these solar systems, when you first turn them on, they'll actually have a countdown that'll go for anywhere from a couple minutes to maybe 5 minutes or so, where they're looking for a stable.
Can I interrupt and ask a question now?
Sure.
Okay. My house might be a little bit unusual. In fact, I know it's unusual for most residential places. We have 300 amp service coming to the house. We have 2 outbuildings that each have their own, they don't have a meter, but they have their own panels in the outbuildings. So the house is supplying the 2 outbuildings off of that 300.
So let me ask this. Let's just say this. You've got a pole 300 amp service.
Right.
And from that meter can main breaker, is it a 300 amp breaker?
Yes.
Okay. Does it split there at that breaker box to go to 3 places?
No,
or does it go to your house first?
It comes into the house to the main breaker panel, and from there we have one line that runs to the shop and a different one that runs out to the shed.
Okay.
And
let me ask this. Your main breaker panel in the house, does it have a breaker on top? And is that a 200 amp breaker?
I'm sure it is. Yeah, I know there's a breaker on top. I can run and go look at it.
Well, so let me take your scenario. Let me walk a couple of ways. You don't need to go see.
Okay.
So you may have the 300 amp service out there. If it goes through that main breaker in the house, then you are limited to 200 amps. Now, it's possible that the other 2 buildings, call it building 1, building 2, they come into that meter can and they tap in at the top of where the main line is coming in. And if you do that, there's a few different rules.
We ran the wires. I know that what feeds building 1 and building 2 have their own breakers in the panel.
Okay. So while you got 300 amp service at the pole, you can't use it. You are limited to 200 because that's the next breaker in line and everything is running through it. So in your case, there's a few ways it could be done. If the solar panel, now you have 300 amp service, do you know what the amp rating of that breaker box is at the pole?
No.
I'll say it a different way. You can open it up and there's probably on the inside of the cover, usually you've got the model number and the current limiting and so forth.
Okay.
When I was looking for my buddy,
I'll tell you this right now. We have 2 boxes in the house. The main box feeds the second box.
Right. Yeah, I've got 3 in my house, so I understand.
Okay. Yeah.
So my guess is it's probably a 400 or 450 amp breaker box. I don't see a lot of 300 amps. Usually it's 200, 250, then you jump up into 400s. We would need to see what Bluebonnet would require, or how it would, or whoever your electric company is. One good thing about these
utilities.
Okay. What we would have to do is get a hold of them. And what I'm finding is all the utility companies, and this is, by the way, some great questions. they tend to have their kind of own set of rules. And what you can do is ping them and say, what are the requirements for um, adding solar? Now, most of these places, the first thing they're going to want to change out their meter can, because the meter cans that are, the spinning dials, those gears aren't really designed to run backwards. And
Right.
eventually those gears get messed up, which is why they want to update to a more digital
Yeah.
meter can. It's not a big deal, but what they're going to do is they're going to change out the can. They're going to come and do a quick inspection, and they're going to turn off your solar and make sure that, okay, it's not putting anything back out. Um, but they're going to basically do a quick safety inspection. And if they find some things, most of these guys they're willing to help. If you be a jerk, trust me, so can they.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But for the most part, it's like, okay, hey, you're missing the red handle. Here's kind of what you got to do for blah blah blah. Or it's got to be, for instance, the red hard disconnect. It needs to be lockable, so that if they come out and they find something a violation, they're going to shut your solar off, put a padlock on it, and they're not going to let you turn on your solar until you fix what's wrong. So they're very adamant about when they find a violation,
Right.
they're going to come back and hard force you to resolve it. So yeah, so in your case, it's actually probably a little bit better because you've got a higher amp service, and the reality is, um, I have actually popped my main 200 amp breaker. Um, and this was a number of years ago, but in my house, I have 2 electric water heaters. I've got a separate metal building with an apartment in it, and a friend of ours was staying there. That's got an electric water heater. We had an RV plugged in. It was the middle of summer. RV's air conditioner was running. All the air conditioners were running. And we popped the 200 amp breaker. Most people do not have anywhere near the setup to be able to draw that much amperage.
Right.
I wasn't trying, but it's you've lived however long you've been at your house and
Um,
never popped the 200. So
yeah, and honestly, we built it, we set it up so that we could add things to it later without having to come in and upgrade it. So we set it so that if we put in a water well and had to put a 30 amp line out to the water well, we could just run the line to it. Or the shop has uh, you know, 2 welders and all kinds of stuff like that out there. It's a typical shop.
mm,
Um,
right,
you know,
yeah, but
all
but
that
the
stuff.
likelihood of 2 welders running simultaneously, plus all the air conditioners and water heaters and it's it's a rare exception
Yeah.
that much would be going on. So and most of the time, outbuildings have maybe a 70 amp breaker on them. Occasionally, you'll see like a 100 amp breaker or so.
Uh,
But
we have a 70 amp on the shop or in the shed and a 100 amp on the shop.
okay, yeah, yeah. So in theory, between those would be 170, leaving you 30 amps at the house. But the reality again is, rarely are you doing all these things at the same time. So, and that's where a lot of an engineer who's looking at the real world is going to say, yes, you've got all these loads, but you're not running a business out of the house with 14 guys each having a welder. So let's be realistic.
Yeah, I mean
So,
the shed, for example, is really only a few electrical plugs and some lights. That's all that really runs
yep.
out there. We could probably get by with a single 20 amp line to it.
Yeah. But you know what? You designed it for potential growth and it's there. So,
Well, yeah.
okay. All right. So let me keep going. So I'm going to walk through 3 different types of installations, and I'm going to talk about the trade-offs for each of these. Um, so the first one is what's called a grid tie only, and this is going to be the lowest cost option. Um, the good news is it's lowest cost, The bad news is when the grid goes down, your solar system shuts off completely, and you can't run a light bulb off of that stuff. So, and of course, there's a reason for that. You don't want to kill someone, um, upstream. But with these, there's two historical ways of doing it, and I've got the drawings kind of off to the right. I'm going to see on my computer. All of you are kind of covering up those drawings, but I spent a whole 10 minutes on these drawings, so I want to talk about it. So the first one is there's a company called Enphase,
Just
and
so
they
you
made this
know, Tony,
popular.
I can see the drawings just fine on my big wide screen. So
Okay, well, I'm working off a laptop, so um, Enphase is the one that's well known for this type of system, and the kind of trapezoids on top are solar panels. You see the red green wire, that means it's DC voltage. And each individual solar panel has a diamond, which is the inverter, tied to it. So if you have 20 solar panels, you have 20, they're called microinverters. And then the microinverters take the solar panel output and converts it into 240 volts. So that's your grid voltage. And these have some advantages. If one solar panel or inverter gets hit by a pickaxe or smashed by hail, or T-Rex rips it off your roof, the others all keep working. So it's more of a fault tolerant setup. And if you go back 10 years ago, my first setup is like this. The individual microinverters were a lower cost method of running your operation. Nowadays, the bottom diagram is far more common and far less expensive, well, modestly less expensive. You'll take your solar panels and you'll hook them up in series. When you do that, what it does is you can do that with a 12 or 10 gauge wire. If you hook them all up in parallel, you might need a double aught gauge copper wire, and go to the hardware store and tell me how much copper is before you have a heart attack. But you'll hook up a bunch of solar panels in series. They go to a single inverter, and that inverter produces a 240 volt system. The trade-offs are the single inverter can be more efficient. It can have more intelligence built into it. If one thing goes bad, let's say the inverter, well, that'll take your whole system out, but it tends to be more reliable. Remember I talked about rooftop systems? What a lot of people do, and I'll use my brother-in-law as an example. He did a rooftop system probably 10 years ago, got all the microinverters, and every year or so I hear about, well, a squirrel chewed up one of the wires, so he had to go up there and redo that. He's had 3 or 4 of his microinverters fail. And part of that is you're on top of the house, on top of an asphalt roof, and it's somewhere between, the surface of Mercury and the surface of the sun in terms of temperature. That high temperature causes electronics to fail prematurely. So with those microinverters, they are all on your roof and they're baking all day long every day. With the second system, that single inverter, usually you're going to put it in the garage, in the house, or a shed or something like that. And, it's not in that super hot space. So that's part of what helps its reliability. Now, of course, the minus is it's going to take up space in your garage, in your house, in your shed. With the microinverters, they're just attached to the back of the solar panels. So you've got some issues with that. And the very basics are that the solar panel converts solar energy into electricity, and it's a DC voltage. Most of your solar panels are producing a 30 volt output. Some of them are 36 volt or 42 volt. It's as solar panel. I've seen solar panels that are like 4 by 8 foot. I mean, they're just ridiculously high. Matter of fact, I don't know what's going on. I saw for house tiles the other day. I saw you can buy a 4 by 4 foot tiles for your floor. So it's, yeah, I guess it's the bigger is better concept. Um, but with your solar panel, it's putting out a DC unregulated voltage. The more sun it gets, the voltage can go up as well as the current. So it's kind of an unstable entity. Whereas your inverter takes that unstable DC voltage and converts it into, I'll use the term, a phase synchronous 240 volt AC. And AC voltage is a sine wave, and you want that synchronized. If you put out voltage that's out of sync, um, it does very, very bad things. So, it's like a fighter pilot that's shooting his machine gun, and they discovered early on that when the machine gun goes through the propeller, if they're not timed, you shoot off your propeller. So, you want to get these kind of things, working exactly in phase. But in terms of your lowest costs, and I'm going to go through it, I'll walk through an example of what a grid tie system looks like, costs and so forth. But I want to describe the other two systems. Okay. This next one, when everyone gets their electric cars and plugs them in and the grid explodes, this is what we're going to be as an off-grid situation. That means there are no mains. Your system has to provide the 60 hertz synchronous power, and it's not going to anyone else's house, just yours. Um, because of the complexity, it's going to be a higher price. And the number one reason, if you look at the diagram on the right, um, this is only done as single large inverters. Um, you don't get the option for all the little bitty ones. And the pink line going over to the batteries, that's where the big money is. Your batteries can be as expensive, if not more, than everything else combined. 10 years ago, people basically used lead acid batteries, kind of the same technology as your car battery. Today, the last few years, lithium ion, so it's called LiFePO. So it's lithium ion ferrous. The good thing is what everyone got real popular, the lithium ion, they're great batteries until they kind of explode and they get really hot. Lithium ion ferrous, LiFePO, those batteries, for the most part, when they fail, they just die. They don't go up in a glory of fire, unless you're driving a Tesla, of course. But it's usually when the Tesla gets in a wreck that causes that. So, but that inverter needs those batteries so they can produce power whether it's day or night. And there's no inverter that produces power off grid without some batteries. And the main reason is as your load surges, if the solar panels aren't putting out enough current that instant, then you're going to get a brownout and you're basically begging for a failure mechanism. The batteries are really the source of your output power, and the solar panel, for the most part, is just keeping the battery stopped off. And now, of course, because you don't have the grid, and if you like my very fancy drawing of the electric pole with the transformer on top, you're 100% self-reliant, for good and for bad. When your batteries go low, you you just sit in the dark. One of the important things on these type of systems, in this, efficiency is everything. You need, you don't want power getting wasted. And for instance, I've looked at some inverters that when it's nighttime, there's nothing going on, they can still draw 200 watts plus. That's really painful when you're doing that off of batteries. The inverter I have, that's an off-grid battery setup. It's drawing maybe 20 watts or so during idle times. So that's something to really look for.
Okay.
Um,
I have a name for what I think you're describing with this installation. I would call this
uh
Alaska setup.
Yes, I was about to say exactly along those lines. A buddy of mine, he is, I can't remember, a couple miles from the nearest power pole, and they wanted $25,000 to put the power poles the couple of miles or so to get juice to his house. And he looked at it and said, I can do an off grid setup and have an electric bill that's always zero. And, and that's the path he chose. But, so there's two scenarios. Like you said, there's the Alaska, and then there's when everyone's got electric cars and the grid blows up. Um, so it's, there are, or a hurricane hits, or, you've got a few illustrations. But when the grid is off and you want to turn on a light bulb, or you'd kill you might sacrifice your oldest child for air conditioning. This is kind of what your system would look like. One thing, I'm going to talk a little bit more about batteries. With the lead acid batteries, they had a usable life typically of 8 to 10 years, and they had a big challenge in that you really didn't want to discharge them more than 50%, because if you got them low, then it would, how to say this,
It
it,
hurts
it
your
just
recharging ability.
it reduces the life of the battery. It reduces its total capacity. Now, if you treat it well, you'll get 8 or 10 years. If you abuse them, they might not last a year. So the old lead acid were maybe 8, 10 years. These new LiFePO batteries, with proper care, they should last 20 to 25 years. For us old parts, it's kind of well, that's the rest of my life kind of a mindset. You go from quote lifetime warranties to what's my real life mean, and that could be different. But the LiFePOs are they're big minus now, not in Texas, but when it gets below freezing, those batteries basically become useless. You can't really discharge them. You can't discharge them without significantly damaging the batteries. So like the big freeze was the last year, I think. If you had your batteries in the house or somewhere where they would stay warm, well, that was just fine. If they were outside and got down to 20 degrees, well, you were in trouble. But it's not that big a deal to try and insulate around your batteries. At least down here. Again, if you're in Alaska, LiFePOs are not a good option.
Okay.
Now, with this type of inverter is a more complicated and more expensive design, where before all it did was take solar and give you AC power. These inverters are kind of a 3-in-1. So they still do that kind of from solar to AC, but they'll also go from solar to battery, and then from battery to AC. So it's kind of a combo unit, and that's what makes it one of the reasons it gets more expensive. One of the things that reduces the cost is this doesn't have to synchronize to anything. You don't worry about the phase of the main line because you don't have a main line. You don't have to worry about quick shutoffs because you have no lines to monitor and shut off if they go down. So this is kind of not the most expensive of units, but it gives you that off-grid ability, and a lot of people, that's what they want. They looked at last year and said, I am not going to sit in darkness for a week like that. So okay. Any questions about this configuration?
I understand it fine.
Okay. Okay.
Hey, this is Daniel. Sorry I'm late. I was building, if you saw on Facebook, I was building stuff in my shop and lost track of time. So,
Okay. Welcome aboard.
mhm.
I'm in the middle of describing all
Yeah,
the
that's fine. I
solar
know
configurations.
I understand all of them. I just wanted to mostly find out what you guys
Okay.
are doing, what you guys are using for equipment and things like that.
Okay. Yep. Yeah, I'll get into that in a little bit. So the third option is what's called a hybrid. And this one looks similar to the last design, but it also includes the power coming from the pole. So this is a system that, it take everything that the off-grid just did, and this does a couple more things. A, it does have to synchronize with the grid. And a good thing is when you're producing more than you need, it will take that power and pump it out to the grid so that you're basically saving money or even potentially making money. And it's also hybrid in that if the grid goes down, so take this scenario, it will disconnect from the grid and drive your critical equipment off of its own 240. When the grid comes back, it resynchronizes and works like normal. So, this is kind of one of these critical care, you have hospital equipment and so on and so forth,
Sure.
things that you don't want to get, short power issues with. This one's a little more expensive for a couple of reasons. First, like I said, it's got to synchronize. Most of them have a built-in transfer switch, so you can have your local circuits connected to the mains or disconnect that and run off of the internals. But like I said, one of the big pluses is when you're overproducing, it'll just make you money by pumping energy out onto the grid. So more people are going towards the hybrids, and some of these inverters, you've got to be careful. Some of them don't necessarily need the battery. Some of them actually, when you start reading the fine specs, they won't put power on the grid. They'll run your equipment and they'll store the batteries, but they don't, there's, because of the UL requirements and safety and liability, they just flat out don't connect. So you're going to have some, one thing I've found with solar equipment, you pretty much need to be an electrical engineer to read all the specs, and even then, some of them will fool you. And then you get to it later and say lots of four-letter words that you shouldn't say. I'm dealing with that right now, where I bought an inverter, and it looked beautiful on paper. And then when I got it, it required all these external, $200 for this and $300 for that and $500 for that. And by the time you're done, you might as well have spent the big bucks to buy a high-end unit. But that's just where, okay, let the buyer beware, I guess. Okay, so and this is where you kind of put pen to paper, and where I'm going to talk about things. So by me, I'm going to talk about Bluebonnet, and we're somewhere in the 11 cents range per kilowatt hour. I talked to my brother just this morning. He's up in Indiana. He's paying 17 cents a kilowatt. I've read about some of the big cities in California. They have fluctuating rates. During the afternoon time frame, electricity actually doubles in rate versus overnight. So there's all kinds of weird things that electric companies do. They all include basically a service fee. For me, it's $22.50. So if I don't use 1 milliwatt of power, I still pay $2.50 a month. I'm sorry, $22.50 a month.
Do you know what BTU charges? Where's Bluebonnet?
I don't.
Is that?
I'm Lockhart. I'm just south of Austin.
Oh, okay. All right.
A little east of San Marcos.
Yeah, Chris, you're in BTU, right?
Yeah, I'm BTU.
Yeah, I'll have to check because I don't know if the rate is variable, but
I don't think it is.
Probably not.
Because
that's more for crazy people like California and New Yorkers.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Sorry to interrupt.
That's all right. Good question. Good question. So I'm going to base everything on $100 electricity. Now, in terms of what your rate is, what you can do is look at your electric and take out if you've got gas and trash and other stuff. Just look at how many kilowatt hours of electricity did you use? How much did they charge you for that? If there's a service fee, take that out of the dollar amount. And then, if you use 1,000 kilowatt hours and it was $100, the $100 divided by 1,000 is 10 cents. 10 cents per kilowatt hour. And that'll tell you what your number is. Now, with kind of my range of 11 cents.
Oh, sorry. I was going to, okay. Yeah, no, I have to subtract fees. Like on average, we use about 3.2 kilowatt hours per month. Does that sound right?
Not even close. Probably maybe.
Well, I'm just looking at my
hours.
bill like month to month right here, and like 2.8, 3.2, 2.1. So that must be, I'll look at, sorry.
How much is your electric bill in terms of dollars?
Usually about $290 a month, 200 to 300.
Okay. Do you have a bill in front of you?
Yeah, actually, I'm just looking at the monthly summary here. Let me look at view bill quickly here. So BTU. All right. So BTU, the current bill was $239, and it said 2.622 kilowatt hours. Yeah, like 2,622 kilowatt hours. Sorry.
2,000. Okay.
Yeah, 2,622.
So on this next line I have here where I say 910 kilowatt hours, that's not quite or close to 3 times that.
Okay.
So your rate is probably a little bit less.
They have a base charge of $38.02, and so then I paid $252.43 for 2,622 kilowatt hours.
So it looks like you're just under 10 cents a kilowatt hour.
Okay. That's about right. That's what I thought.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm using an example of the 11 cents per kilowatt, and let's say your electric is $100 a month. Just, so if you use 200 or 300 or 400, the scale's upward real easy. So if you're using $100 a month at 11 cents, that's 910 kilowatt hours. Or on a daily basis, 910 divided by 30 days is about 30 kilowatt hours per day. So that's if you're doing the $100 with this feed. Rule of thumb, and this is where, I'm an engineer. You take summer, you make more. You take winter, you make less. On average, solar panels in this area produce about 5 hours of electricity of their rated power per day. So if you've got a solar panel that is a 100-watt solar panel, you're going to average through the year about 500 watts from it per day, 500 watt hours. So you got the 5-hour number there. Now, a lot of people always use that's 500. Great, that's what I use. Well, you lose power in the wires and you lose efficiency in the inverters, and then there's some overhead power usages and so forth. I like to use a number of at least 10%, closer to 20%, and the better price you get on your equipment, the lossier it is. But for this example of $100 a month and a 30 kilowatt hour consumption per day, you're going to need realistically about 7.5 kilowatts of solar panels. Now, your average solar panel, matter of fact, I went and measured mine earlier just to make sure I had the numbers. My panels are 39 inches wide, 65 inches tall. And that's a 265 watt panel. But a lot of your panels are in that, call it 250 range. Your 7.5 kilowatts is about 30 panels, which that's not a small setup. I've seen a lot bigger, but imagine 30 panels is going to be 3 rows of 10, so you're going to say about 16 feet by maybe 30 feet in area. So it's not gigantic. It's not, quarter acre, but it is a meaningful amount. But with 7.5 kilowatts of solar, you're going to be producing $100 a month on average. And people say, I want my electric bill to be zero. My electric bill is, my example below. I have a $200 a month electric bill. Well, you'll need about 15 kilowatts. Someone had said their electric bill was $500 a month. Well, you're going to need, about 38 kilowatts.
Yeah.
About maybe 40 kilowatts.
Ours used to be like that until we spray foamed the attic and then upgraded our HVAC system. And now we're, like I said, we're paying under 300, even with the house staying at 72 degrees and 68 at night.
Yeah. You raise a really good point. You can produce as much as you possibly want.
Mm-hmm.
And now there's some ladies in the call, and I should have started with saying I'm an old fart male chauvinist pig. So when you hear me say something, I'll just refer you back to that statement. So here's a statement that would go with that. My wife does not know what an off switch means. If the air conditioner doesn't start with a 6, she's not comfortable. So, it's hard for me to produce more than she's willing to consume.
Yeah, we're the opposite. I grew up in Canada,
Yeah.
So 68 was normal. And my wife being an Aggie from Texas, 78 was normal. So it took us 30 years of marriage to get it down to 72 and 68 at night.
Yeah, I understand. But what I was going to say is efficiency and the biggest thing here is air conditioning, right? But efficiency with insulation, good air conditioning system that's been maintained, clean your coils, etc. Those can matter as much as everything else. My house is actually ICF exterior, which means my walls are a foot thick. My windows are triple pane casement. So I've got a very, very efficient home design. But once you're in the house, it's really hard to retrofit. When you're building, that's the time to think about some of those things. Now, the bullet above this I wanted to mention. So let's use the example where we talked about 10 cents per kilowatt hour. If that's what you pay to the electric company, and some people think, I'm going to produce twice as much as I need, so I'm going to make my money back twice as fast. That's not actually true. So most electric companies, not all, but most of them, when you overproduce, so you're putting energy back on the grid, they pay you half of what you pay them, because that's just their business model. When they buy from ERCOT or whoever's putting the energy out, from a dam somewhere up the river, when they're buying energy from those guys, their rates are usually half of what they charge you. The other half is their overhead costs. When they ran power to your property, maintaining the lines, trimming trees, fixing outages, all their billing and accounting and so forth. Liability is a big one. Basically their business model is they double their costs. Well, they're not going to pay you twice as much just because you've got a fancy solar system than they pay ERCOT. So, so overproducing actually is diminished returns, if that makes sense. Okay. So with this page, and take a picture of this page, because if your electric bill is 100, 200, 300, 500, whatever it is, some of these numbers on this page will scale. If you want to completely, truly eliminate your solar, your electric bill.
Okay. Tony, if you're going to get to this in a minute, stop me. But if I read what you're saying here correctly, it seems to me the smart way is not to try and pick what your max usage is for a time, but to cover a little bit more than your minimum usage so that you're still actually paying a utility bill, but you're covering the majority, or you're covering the majority of your normal usage plus all your peaks. Is that right?
Close, not quite. I
Okay.
would aim, if you have 1 month a year that's twice everything else, okay, throw that month out. But I
Okay.
would work for your average or slightly above your average. And a lot of times it's going to work out to, you've got to buy these by the pallets, and this is how many came on a pallet.
Yeah.
But I will tell you, nobody's electric bill goes down over time. It only goes
Right.
up. Things get less efficient. Your kids turn into energy consumers, or they even better, they move back with you.
Well,
That's why whenever they
it
leave,
sounds like
always convert the room.
you really don't ever want that meter running backwards, even though that's what a lot of people think they're going to do.
So
Yeah.
let me be more specific on that. That's a good
Okay.
question. It depends on your electric company. My company, Blue on it, we average it out every month. So let me illustrate a typical day. Overnight, let's say I use 3 kilowatt hours. Just a couple lights, maybe air conditioner cycles, whatever. And then during the day, in the morning it's a little bit less, but just throughout the day, I produce 5 kilowatts more than I consume. Yeah, it's getting hot, but my solar's kicking in, and it averages out to 5 above. So on average, I produced 2 more than I used.
Okay.
Electric company isn't going to, at least my electric company, they're not going to say, well, you use these rates, so we're going to bill you this. We're going to go minute by minute and maximize your bill based on that. They're just going to say at the end of the 30 days, you used 200, you produced 205. It's a 5 kilowatt difference. We pay you 50 cents on the dollar for that. So I would take this high middle of your monthly electric bills and aim for somewhere in that range.
Okay.
All right. Now,
Makes sense.
that's assuming your checkbook can afford it. A lot of times, your checkbook's going to dictate what you're going to do and how you're going to do it and when you're going to do it, right? So, and by the way, these electric companies that come, not electric, I'm sorry, these solar companies that come out and give you estimates, those guys are notorious for being snake oil salesmen. They promise you, well, what they say and what's in writing, it's like a used car dealer.
Yeah.
What they say and what they actually deliver, it's like two different arrangements. And, it's definitely something I would get some other, friendly opinions on, because, I'll give you an example. Well, no, I think I shall get into it in the next couple slides. Don't let me forget to talk about my brother's stepson as a bad example. Okay, so let me move on. How are we doing on time? Oh man, it's 8 o'clock. Okay, I'm trusting everyone. Does anyone have a time cutoff, or I can't run over an extra 10, 15 minutes?
I'm good.
We're good.
All good? Okay, good. So let me keep going. So here, I'm going through some real world examples. One of them is mine. This one's a buddy of mine I helped him with just a month or so ago. So he put up 13 kilowatts of solar panels. It was 50 panels, 265 waters. He had a bunch of pipe fencing, that heavy like drill pipe for some of his animals. And so he had 2 clusters of solar panels so that your pipe fence is about 5 feet up, and then you want to tilt your solar panels like 25, 28 degrees southward. And so we just built it on top of those panels. It works out great because his animals now have a bit more shade or protection from rain and so forth. And it elevated him off the ground and reduced his costs.
So
now,
you're saying I
I'm
should
gonna talk
put
about
these out in my yard and put beehives under them?
no, because you want your beehives in full sun, Chris.
The last few weeks, I have been regretting having my hydrogen
Well,
done.
yeah, okay, I get it. Right, you're
That's
right.
another issue.
Well, yeah, that's okay. So, but it's 13 kilowatts. He kind of had the pipe fence as his foundation, and he built up and off of that. That saves him a little bit. His is a grid tie only. So when the grid goes down, his shuts down. His big thing was, I want to get rid of my electric bill. This 13 kilowatts is producing about 175 bucks a month, approximately. His cost, now keep in mind, this was a do-it-yourself job. The only person he hired was basically the welder, and then he fed me some what are those fizzy drinks? Cocas, I don't know, whatever it's called. So that was the only people he really hired. That's it. Thank you. Those are kind of interesting things. I never had that before. But he spent about 10 grand. That included all the costs. I'll break them down. His payback, doing the math, is about 57 months. So we're talking 4.5-ish years, which is an incredibly fast payback time. In terms of his costs, he had about 4 grand in the solar panels, about 1,500 in 2 of the inverters, and he went with a company called Growatt, which for grid tie systems, that's probably one of your better choices. It is a Chinese company. It is the best of the Chinese companies that are out there, and they are substantially less than most of their competitors. They've kind of taken over the marketplace for this type of inverter. I think he paid about 1,500 bucks to the welder. He had a couple thousand for, the steel supports he did add, and he of course primed them and put Rust-Oleum paint on them. He didn't use aluminum, so steel, you want to protect that. I'm going to estimate about $1,000 for the electrical stuff, the wire, the breakers, the PVC, the disconnect, so forth. Now, this next thing I'm going to say with my tongue like sticking through my cheek out into the next room. The inverter has a 5-year warranty. Solar panels come with a 25-year warranty. Here's the caveat. These companies lie. When things happen, they're going to find a reason why it's not covered by their warranty. Oh, you had chewing gum in there, that doesn't count. Oh, you had a storm, or this or that, or whatever it is, they're going to come back and say, it's going to be out of your pocket for the costs. But the longer the warranty from the company, at least that gives you an idea of what quality level you have. A lot of these Chinese brands have a 30-minute warranty. Now, he probably spent 100 to 200 hours, or man hours, or whatever you want to call that, between the painting and talking to people and setting it up and doing some trenching and all that kind of stuff. But the bottom line there, 10 grand, he did it himself. I know that a professional installer would have given him, most of them, their estimate would have been in the 50 grand range. And if you take that, even 200 hours of man hours of labor, you're paying yourself 200 bucks an hour. So there aren't a lot of jobs that pay that kind of rate. And even if you're working one of those jobs, you could hire 3 or 4 guys for a whole lot less and do the job. I don't know what it is about these solar guys. They are making incredible profits. Maybe it's just the hype. It's like, the Cabbage Patch dolls when those things were $200.
It's Bitcoin.
But really, that's the difference. Say it again?
It's Bitcoin.
Oh, there you go. Yes, the solar installers are also Bitcoin dealers. But realistically, this is a 5x markup. And they get people to sign up for this. And the example I was going to use, so take this guy's setup, 13 kilowatts, 10 grand. My brother's stepson, he puts about 5 or 6 kilowatts on his roof. So it's a roof install, which I hate. And he did it with a company, and he's got I can't remember, it was like a 25-year basically payment plan with those guys. And he's paying them $175 a month. And I think he has my brother said he has like a $15 electric bill. So I don't know if that's average or that's their promise or what it is. But 25 years at $175, he's never going to save a penny with his installation.
No.
And it was, I think, 40 grand, $42,000. So I mean, that's even more expensive than this setup. But they saw him
Rate are
come
they
in.
charging for that?
Yeah, if had he talked to me, I would have explained to him, what he's looking at. But there's man, and that's why we're having this conversation. Is I want to make sure people hear that yes, there are installers that will work for a fair price. They are kind of hard to find because they can all charge a $200 an hour labor fee, and that's what they're getting. A buddy of mine, so most of us are beekeepers. He's up in Pennsylvania. He does removals, and he does the full thing from start to finish to putting a coat of paint on when he's done. I mean, he's a true full subcontractor. He charges $250 per person per hour. That's his going rate, whether it's him or him and a laborer. And people pay it. He's got a month's worth of work backlogged right now. So God bless him. But, I kind of want to paint this picture of, on this, and you can take a picture of this page. You can kind of see the price breakdown for the various parts, estimated time frame of workload. And really, the skills is not, can you paint? Can you drill? Can you put some screws and use a screwdriver and wrench? Can you push some wires through a PVC pipe and glue the pipe together? Really, that's the majority of what he was doing to get this done. The final electrical connections, I did all of that, and you can hire an electrician to do some of the final stuff. It's not that big a deal.
Yeah.
So, anyways, any questions on this example?
Nope.
All right. Now this is my place. So, does anyone recall have shipping containers? I just happen to have put my shipping container, you see in the picture, orientated east-west, mostly east-west, and man, it worked out perfect. Putting the solar panels on top dropped the temperature inside by probably 30 degrees this time of year. So all my materials and so forth aren't baked like they were before. And mounting it to the shipping container was an absolute breeze. Let me kind of walk through the numbers on this. This is a 40-foot shipping container. I put about 8 kilowatts of solar panels on top. On this setup, I did a hybrid system, so it's battery backup. And it's putting out just over $100 a month in terms of what it's generating with electricity. My cost was just over 10 grand. So if you notice, it's a little bit more than my buddy's setup. It's 5 kilowatts less, so that's about 40% less power output. But that's what batteries do to you. And because of the batteries in my setup, it's a 99-month payback. That's what PV is, payback. So you're talking, about 8 or 9 years to recover your cost. So it was about $2 grand for the solar panels. And there's a couple ways you can do with inverters, and I'll talk about them a little bit later. A couple grand for an inverter charge controller, the all-in-one units. A few grand, $3,500 for some LiFePO batteries. About $1 grand is what I paid the welder. I felt bad about steel. steel would have been half that price a year or so ago. And then my copper wires, my wires are running probably 100, 150 feet.
What
So
inverter do you have?
So some different choices. There's a Watts 24/7. There's the Schneider. Growatt makes one in this kind of a range. What I actually did, I'll talk more about it. What I actually did, I kind of cheated. But if you want to get the Cadillac, there's a company called Solark.
Yeah, earlier than in Texas.
SOL-ARK.
Yeah, but they
they're out
require
in
you to buy
Dallas.
through a dealer or a distributor. You can't buy directly from them, which kind of sucks.
Actually, the prices aren't that different.
Really?
Anyways, we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then about $1,000 again for electrical breakers and so on and so forth. Your inverters, anywhere from 1 to 10-year warranty, depending on the brand. Again, the 25 years on the solar panel, and of course, like I said, they lie. Notice that the number of hours was substantially less than putting them on top of the drill pipe that my buddy had, because this was pretty much straight setup, very sturdy, stable.
Yeah, that looks like purling.
nothing-
So what did you use to bolt down? Did you use like Unistrut or something, or?
No, good question. So if you look at that bottom left picture,
Yeah,
the verticals are 3-inch square pipe.
yeah, I see that.
Steel, nothing fancy.
The horizontal is what I'm
diagonal-
wondering.
Okay, so the diagonal and then the horizontals, I went with 2x6 C-channel,
Okay,
and the verticals are welded onto the shipping container.
oh, I see, yeah.
At the top, where the vertical meets the C-channel,
Mhm.
there's a weld on that. Everything else is screwed together.
So the C channel is
So-
basically just an L bracket steel that's got a lot of holes in, and then you just put the bolts through them, right?
Well, I had to drill it all.
Okay.
And
got it,
one thing
yeah.
I will tell you is drill the holes when you're on the ground. I
Yeah.
did. It's about 16 times easier
Yeah.
than when you're on top of that shipping container or wherever you're at. And when I did this, because I pre-drilled, the biggest headache you're going to have if you pre-drill is you get it up there and your holes don't align.
Yeah.
So what I did was I pre-drilled, I put them up there, I bolted a solar panel on each end,
Mhm.
and then bolted it all together so that, I knew my holes were all going to align. There was not going to be any question about that. Now, you'll also notice my wires are kind of hanging and sloppy. I said when it cools off, I'm going to go fix that. And so now I'm saying, dadgummit, when it cools off, I'm going to go fix it.
Yeah.
So those wires hanging are like a call to squirrels. Please come and chew on these wires.
Yeah. So I was going to go with the Unistrut because that way you just have the sliding bolts, so you don't have to worry about where your holes are.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, with this kind of stuff, it's trade-offs.
yeah.
So, that Unistrut material doubles and triples the cost of the steel.
Yeah, it's $30 for a 10-foot section at Lowe's. You're gonna need 2 sections per, and if you got 20 feet of pulse, you're gonna need, there's $120 worth of just Unistrut plus bolts.
And my
not
supports are
crazy.
spaced out 13 feet on there.
Yeah.
And yeah, everything you do becomes that hurts. Ouch, that's
Mhm.
expensive.
Mhm.
It's a trade-offs.
Mhm.
Like I've said before. And this I put Rust-Oleum paint on. Some of them that are heavy galvanized, you don't have to paint them, which is nice. Or if they're
So is
aluminum, even better.
yours set up as a grid type plus battery backup, or how are you set up?
So this is a hybrid.
Okay.
So this goes to the inverter. The inverter has batteries on it. It ties to my local grid.
Okay.
My setup is special because what you see on the top right here is my old solar panels.
Mhm.
And you look in the background, you see my shipping container with the solar panels
Yeah.
further downhill.
Good use of a ladder.
Now, my ladder is vertical. This steel I-beam got bent a couple of weeks ago when we had those really high winds blow through.
Yeah.
And what happened is my cables holding the panels
Mhm.
busted. So the panels tilted over, and there was about 10,000 pounds of wind force.
Wow.
That steel I-beam is a 4 by 10 inch heavy I-beam,
Mhm.
and it's still bent at, what is it, about 10, 15 degrees.
Crazy.
So I'm slowly pulling it back straight up. So yeah, you get one thing, and that was my illustration with this picture, is, man, what you think is strong. Now, on this original design, I designed it where I could tilt. This was 8, 10 years ago.
Mhm.
I designed where it would tilt and track the sun, which
Mhm.
gets you about 30% more power per day. In today's world, that overhead is a bad trade-off. Definitely not worth
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
But um, you don't like
So,
your solar panels. Go ahead.
I mean, I'm not sure what everyone is looking for, but I think the scenario that I'm looking for is a happy medium between, a grid tie with, if I look at all the, with the exception of last year's winter, the typical power outage we see out here is 5 minutes to 30 minutes. Out on 1179 out here in Brazos County. Like, for example, we had a fire last Monday in the pasture just behind our place because two power lines, the posts were heaving up and they shorted and they tripped the breaker. It took 30 minutes before they had everything reset. So on average, when I look at all our power outages, that's usually what I'm looking for. So my thought was, enough grid tie to take my bill, maybe close to zero. I'm not sure because I haven't calculated how many panels it is to take the number of kilowatt hours down to that. Then have enough battery to cover me for, let's say, an hour. And maybe not all circuits. Maybe I'll have like one of those mini panels that auto, flips over to the batteries for all the essential circuits. I'm not sure yet, but that's the part I'm trying to figure out. And it really boils down to, the type of inverter or inverters I'm going to really need. I understand the batteries, I understand the solar panels, all that stuff. It's the area that to me is important is these all-in-one inverters. And I've been looking at the Grow Watts and I looked at SolarArc. I haven't done a feature price warranty comparison yet. But that's kind of what I think a lot of my friends that we've been looking at is take the price down, but provide me some backup when the power goes out. And I can add more batteries over time if I, as I find them economically.
Yeah. So let me throw a couple things at that, and a lot of people have that mindset. So let me go back to
Just for example, friends online right now, this part that scares me on Facebook, they're buying into these $50,000 and $80,000 plans. They go, oh my God, my plan, I pay $129 a month now instead of $300 a month to this company for the next 20 years because they basically own the system, right? And I think we all have friends on Facebook who are falling for these things. And they come in and go, no, it's not going to cost you anything, but you're going to pay me about $100 to $200 a month, and they own the system and all that wonderful stuff. So you're saving $100 a month, but is it worth it? I don't think so. Not for that kind of money.
So let me address that part of that here. So okay. And you asked a bunch of really good questions. I'm gonna try and if I miss
Yes.
parts of it, tell me. But let me start. First thing, when I talk about rooftop, when
Mhm.
you have to replace your roof, because you will,
Oh yeah.
because of a
Yeah.
hailstorm or panels get busted, you're gonna spend 5 or 10 grand
Mhm.
because they're on the roof and the roofers can see ka-ching, ka-ching.
Yeah.
They're gonna dig in your wallet. Right there, the first time you do that, you just threw away every penny you would have ever saved with
Mhm.
solar. And not only is it that going to happen, you're putting the holes in the roof to guarantee
Yeah.
it happens.
I was
It
told
freezes.
your insurance company may or may not cover the cost of the roof replacement if you have panels because it could void their, it could have been cause of the damage.
Exactly. And you've
Tony,
got
can I
stuff up
ask
there,
a
like I said.
question about
Sure.
this? So I was actually thinking about the roof of my shop.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
30 by 40 foot metal building with a metal roof.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing too, or thinking about.
And
So yep,
I don't
I've
know
got
if
a
it's
30.
the direction that it faces is the right direction, the wrong direction. To me, I think it's almost perfect, but I don't know.
Isn't, as Elon Musk says, every Tesla factory is built facing north south so that they can optimize all the solar cells on the roof of the buildings.
Well, that's marketing. Um, so, and that's what that guy does. So let me address that a couple ways. I've also got a 30 by 40. So effectively, you've got really a 15 by 40 foot roof. You're going to put it on one side.
Yeah.
That putting it on top of a metal roof, you're begging for trouble. You can. A lot of people do. I'm not saying it's it's a guarantee, but what with having done it a few different ways, the freestanding to me seems to, unless you're in an unusual location because of trees or whatever. But and think about different types of my third bullet there, freestanding. If your wife wants a covered patio, throw solar over the top. If you want to have covered parking, because we all fill our garages with crap, make a covered parking spot where effectively make a carport.
Yeah.
Where
My
your
shop
driveway's
actually has a carport right out in front of it,
Yeah.
Okay.
and it's a
We'll do
metal
this
roof
again
too.
by the house. If you've got livestock and you want to give them a shade spot, build an elevated spot above that. You've got a tractor you want to cover, you can. And what's a great thing there is that's an ag expense because basically you have extremely high dollar farm equipment cover.
I like it.
You want to kind of get it above dust. If you have a lot of gravel roads by you, and you'd be amazed at how much dust settles on stuff if it's only, and a lot of people say, well, it's 6 feet up, and then all of a sudden, it's 5 feet up because of the supports, and you're going to whack your head on that. You go a little higher, put a few extra dollars into the steel, and these kind of ideas, but my buddy, he put his as an animal shade zone. So, you can get all of these ways of having your solar elevated without being on top of a roof. You already have a roof. You don't need a second roof. And it's, like I said, going to reduce the reliability of the panels because sitting up there for 25 years in that heat, the efficiency of your solar panel is actually reduced every day, and the degradation over time is going to be faster.
Okay, how
So,
is what I was talking about different than what you did with your building 2 slides back or the slide back? Yeah,
shipping container.
the shipping.
So what's different here is, most of the time when you put this on top of a roof, it's normally a 6 or maybe 10-inch elevation. And you have the slope of the roof, and when the heat hits the first part of the building, the underside of the entire solar panel is baking because of that heat from the conduction of the steel of the building, the roof. With this design, basically the solar panels are shading my shipping container.
Well, that's actually
and so-
exactly what I was thinking of doing with my carport in front of my shop.
Well, if you have a carport, get rid of the metal on that and put the solar panels in place. That would be one option.
Okay.
I don't like attaching, because if you look at this, I've got anywhere from 1 foot to 4 feet of space under those solar panels. So even the lightest breeze makes a tremendous difference.
Okay.
Yeah, see,
avoiding the heat.
I'm going to put mine directly on my carport. I think I understand the heat. I was doing the calculations, and I think with the solar panels are already getting direct heat. And if I got 2 or 3 inches between the panel and the actual metal roof, I think I'm going to be fine.
What I'm
Plus, you got the
saying,
air.
yeah, what I'm saying is my carport roof
Mhm.
looks exactly like your shipping container roof.
It's flat.
It's flat.
Oh, it is. Oh, you
Well,
got.
I
I
mean,
know it.
there might
yeah,
be-
It's at an angle.
There
I know
might
what you mean.
be. I actually, when I had them put it in there, I had them put a very, very slight angle on it.
Mhm.
I mean, if
Water
it rains
runoff.
on it, it takes a while for the water to
Yeah.
run off.
Yeah, mine is more of a peak to peak. I think I
Yeah.
can, and it's a low peak in the way the sun crosses it. I was going to put panels on both sides.
I mean, it's probably, I think it's 20 feet by 18 feet. And and it's 18 feet from one end to the other. And I think there's only about a 3-inch drop across the 18 feet.
Yeah, that's probably in the 6 kilowatt range in terms of that area. Now, you'd want to elevate one side higher than the other because you want
Yeah,
that
that's
southern
fine.
tilt.
Well, we'd probably
Um,
elevate one side based on where the sun is hitting, right?
Yep. And let me see if slide this over. Yep. So I don't know if you can see it very well. On this bottom picture, you see where my cursor is?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
You see there's a diagonal right here.
Yeah.
And with that diagonal pipe, if wind comes in laterally, that diagonal is going to give me extra stiffness and strength on that vertical.
Yeah.
You're going to want to look at that carport structure and make sure that, what bent my other solar panel tower was probably 100-mile-an-hour winds.
Well, 100-mile-an-hour
worst thing in
winds
the world.
don't bend a lot of stuff.
Well, yeah, it does. But 80 mile an hour is not that uncommon.
Yeah.
We probably get that every year or two. And worst thing in the world is to go out there and your carport's knocked over on top of your vehicles. And then you got to go and investigate what your insurance will do, which is another thing you should do up front. Let's see what your insurance says.
Well, yeah. Okay. Well, anyway, go ahead. I was just. Before we leave it, let me ask, and I think you answered this question a minute ago. What direction should these things be tilted towards?
You want them tilted southward. And now here's an interesting thing. The median point for us is about 28 degrees tilted southward. I don't agree with that theory. That would give you your kind of maximum power throughout the year, because in winter it's like 56 degrees. In summer it's like 6 degrees. We get more sunlight in summer. So I would put a lighter tilt, maybe 23 degrees, somewhere in that range. If you have a carport, that'll be less wind force on your panels, and that'll give you more of an imbalance. It'll generate more in summer, less in winter. But this is Texas. We use more electricity in summer because that's when we're running the air conditioner 24/7.
Yeah.
So, you definitely want southward tilted and, in the low 20-degree range. Is there a difference between 21 degrees and 23 degrees? A couple dollars a year. Don't worry about it.
Okay. Now that's the slope of the line. What about you said south would be 180 degrees, right? From magnetic north?
Correct.
Is it due south? I mean, do they have an exact, because I know when we were doing satellite dishes, it had to be pretty precise.
No, again, it's a couple dollar a year difference. This shipping container, I was probably off maybe 5 degrees or so, and it might make a $10, $20 difference a year. Here's the thing. Your carport is a done deal, and you're going to tilt it to one side or the other. Whichever one is most the southward direction is the direction you're going to tilt it.
Well, it's kind of already facing south, so that's one reason why I was thinking of that. So,
yeah.
All right,
then
cool.
That's your answer.
Okay.
All
right.
So Daniel, let me go back to part of your question, and this is something I've struggled with. Some of us, there's a saying that says, how's it go? Cry once, pay once. Oh, what's that term? I know Tara uses it all the time. Buy once, cry once. That's what it is. With these inverters, I've used the Grow Watts, and they're okay, but they have some issues. I've done the Solarc, and that thing was in the old guy's terms, that was the Cadillac. I mean, there were no issues. It has every bell, whistle, you can want, and its reliability is just beyond. It's the one with the 10-year warranty. You can even get them that are EMP proofed, which is a giant lie, but
Yeah.
well, it'll help you
Yeah.
with lightning storms.
Yeah, I love
Um,
what they say on their website. I mean, the specs and everything look great. You know, because I'm
Yeah.
looking, like I said, I'm either looking at two 6 kilowatt inverters to do both legs on my place from GrowWatt. I know they make bigger ones, but I found the price optimal is to keep them both separate, or and also point of failure wise. And then Solar Arc and GrowWatt both have larger 8 to 12K units that are, you know, 240 volt all in one kind of units, which look pretty cool.
Yeah,
But
with the
they
center
get
tap.
way up. Yeah, they just get a lot more expensive when you do that. Like I can take two 6 kilowatt GrowWatts and I can sync them and use one on each leg that way as well too. So like I said,
Yeah.
that's really the
So-
big thing. Panels, I understand. I think I know where to get decent. I've been buying Canadian panels, but you know, from A1 Solar up there, I'm getting 315 watt, 120 cell panels. I was paying 162 2 years ago, probably a little bit more now.
I'd remind me to talk about solar panels in a minute.
Mhm.
So with the Solarc, they've got a 5 kilowatt, 8, 12, and 50. They just came out with a 15 kilowatt.
Mhm.
You know, you compare the two, you can get the 12K for about $6,000 right now.
So how do I
If you
know,
go
like
with-
I said, what, like if I said I'm using 2,622 kilowatt hours a month, what am I, how do I know it's enough for each day? I mean, my Sense app tells me that I average between 3,000 watts and 11,000 watts at any given time throughout the day.
Mhm.
So,
So-
what do I look for when I'm trying to get there so that I, you know, I'm
I mean,
efficient, but not
you're-
over producing?
You're not trying to live off grid.
Correct. I'm
So,
not.
you know, the average
No.
is just fine for you. You
Yeah.
produce more this hour and less next hour.
Yeah.
And so don't worry about, you know, that 3 versus 11. What is your average per day?
Mhm.
If your electric bill is, let's say $270, and if you're in the 9 kilowatt or 9 cents a kilowatt hour, yeah, you're using, what's that number? So about 9 kilowatts a day.
Yeah. Yeah.
That works out right. Is it 9 or 90? Maybe it's
Probably
90.
about 9. Yeah.
No, that's got to be 90. Because that's, so in other words, $270 is about $10
Well, the last,
a day.
according to Sense, the last 30 days, I've averaged 4,225 watts per day. Does that make sense?
That's way low. No,
It seems low because our house is 3,400 square feet, and I know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're probably using 90 kilowatts a day. If your electric bill is about 270, let me
Yes.
go back.
Yeah. My
let's go back
kilowatt hour. Well, actually, we should be able to take 2,622 kilowatt hours per month and divide that by 30, right?
So let's use my example. At
Yeah.
$100 a month, you're about not quite 3 times that.
Mhm.
So in this example, it was 30 kilowatts a day. So yeah, the 90 kilowatt hours
Yeah.
is close to what you consume
Yeah.
per day.
Yeah. Because I
So-
took 2622 divided by 30 and I get 87.4. So 90 is a good number. Okay.
So if I take this example,
Mhm.
so you're going to be about 3 times that 7.5. So that's about 22.5 kilowatt hours is what
Of
you
panels.
would need in terms of panels, right? So, you know, whether it's multitudes of the GrowWatts or I think the Solarcs, you know, with that you
Mhm.
get 2 12s paralleled up.
Mhm.
Now, one nice thing, and I'm going to throw this out there,
Mhm.
is with your, you know, in your case scenario, you're really trying to cut your bill down, and then the ability to
Have
be
like,
off grid.
well, just
is-
for power glitches, right? I mean, the nice thing about a GrowWatt is it instantly will convert to the battery if the grid goes down, right?
Yeah, Solarc, all of them will.
Yeah, you're right. All the modern ones
lot
do
of them.
that. Yeah.
So but losing power for half an hour, man,
Mhm.
for that, your easiest thing is get a $1,000, $2,000 generator
Mhm.
and just kick that on.
I
That's
don't want to go that route. I've already got a generator. I've been that. I want to have it just seamlessly and quiet.
okay.
We run too much electronics in the house to have the slight glitch and the delay. So I want a battery holdover for an hour that I can grow later in life. So to me, putting 24 volt, 200 watt 24 volt lithium batteries, I think that works out to, is that
Well, I
4,000?
would go to the 48 volt. That's the standard. So you can go and pick up a 48 volt 100 amp hour lithium ion LiFePO battery, and they're going to be in the $1,500 range.
Yeah.
And that one battery would give you about 5 kilowatts.
Yeah, that's right.
Capacity.
48 times 100. Yeah.
Yeah. So, 5 kilowatts, we said that you use about 90 in a day.
Mhm.
So that's
So
about
90
an hour's
divided by
worth of juice.
24. Yeah.
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 Yeah. So, you can just have a single battery.
Yeah. For a couple of hours.
And and that's $1,500.
Yeah.
And
honestly, that's all I'm looking for. And I know I think the math, you said 22.5 kilowatt hours. I'm thinking, well, I don't want to, I'll have to price it out. I'm not really sure what that would cost because that makes the inverter pretty pricey. I need 22.5 kilowatt hours of panels, but I also need an inverter to handle all that, right?
Yes.
So my thought is I want to grow in steps, right? I'm not going to go all out and do it all in one pace because I'm doing everything myself. I thought initially I was going to go with like maybe 8 or 10,000 kilowatts of power as my first phase. And that's why I was going to go with 2 6,000 watt inverters. But is that going to cost me more down the road than just buying the upfront inverters now that are bigger and then adding more panels over time? So
because these inverters can scale,
Mhm.
it's not as bad as it might seem.
Mhm.
Where you're going to kill yourself is, wire everything for full capacity.
Yeah, exactly.
Pulling wires later sucks big time.
Yeah, I have full my and I'm going to do like Chris was saying, I'm going to cover my carport. I'm on 5 acres. I have room to put panels in the yard on an array like Tony Proven did in his place. I was looking at what he did and put some on my shop as well, possibly, or over maybe build a tractor carport because I do like that idea. Never thought of the ag exemption.
If you're doing 22 kilowatts, you could probably end up in all these places and might still have more solar panels left over.
Yeah.
So have do all the trenching at one time, burying the wires at one time. The power going to the breaker box rated for everything.
Yeah. Can you mix and match panels, by the way? I mean, I'm an electrical engineer and I should know this, but if my current panels are, I think they're 33, I forget what the VOC is on them, but can I mix and match my panels?
Don't want to. So a couple
it's
things.
It's not like batteries
if
putting 1.5 and a 9 together give you 10.5.
Well, so if you're doing multiple inverters, you can have different groups per inverter. You don't want to mix within a single inverter.
Okay, so if I've committed already to these 33.1, well, what do we look for, the VOC volts or the VMP? What's the important voltage?
They're both going to scale the same way.
Okay.
They both. And by the way, some other things, for instance, and this is another example of the Solarc versus GrowWatt.
Mm-hmm.
The Solarc's really the best in terms of optimal output.
Mm-hmm.
If you give it 100 watts, about 96 watts goes through.
Okay.
It's a very, just a few percent. When you go to the GrowWatt unit, at the right optimal point, at this one particular point, it might be, 92%, but then it might drop to 85% at other input levels.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to lose somewhere in the probably 5-10% efficiency just due to that design. And when it puts out power, in fact, just yesterday I was looking at a guy who, with his grow watt inverter, you get a distorted sine wave coming out of it. It's not what it should be. Whereas a grow watt's not going to do that. Your grow watt, you're going to need an auto transformer, which means it puts out 240 only, and the auto transformer is what's going to give you your 120 taps off of it.
Oh, I thought you didn't need that with the newer ones. Am I wrong? Because I know some units do
No.
and don't.
Most of the newer ones, especially the lower cost ones, require that.
Oh, okay.
And that's true for grow watt or watt 24/7, etc. MPP.
So and solar does not need that, or solar.
SolArc does not require that.
So they basically just
Now
have
you
everything built in the main unit.
Yeah. Now, something to factor in is, like a SolArc 12K, you kind of get 6 kilowatts on each leg. If you try and put 9 kilowatts on one leg, it's going to barf on you because it's not designed to do that. So you've got to have some kind of a balancing factor.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, all these things kind of roll together as part of and even another one's noise. The grow watt doesn't have fans, but you have to provide your own fan because those fins get hot.
Yeah.
Especially depending on where you put it. The SolArc's got some fans, and they're fairly quiet.
Okay. This has been helpful, actually. Just so you know, I'm getting some wife sticking her head in the office here.
And something. Yep. And I hope everyone else is benefiting from this as well. Let me talk about solar panels.
Yeah.
So I'm going to get political here, and if you don't like it, well, I'm sorry. No, I'm not. So this is really interesting. My first setup, close to 10 years ago, I paid 90 cents per watt of my solar panels. That was the price back then. The setup I did last year was under 30 cents per watt. So, I mean, that was a 3x reduction in price. Right now, you're not going to find much under about 55 cents per watt. So, it's almost doubled since last year.
Panels, like I said, was 162 for 315 watt panels. So that was 51 cents. That was in 2020, and that was coming from panels out of Canada.
Yeah. So that was a little on the high side for them.
Yeah.
Let me explain what's going on right now. So a few months ago, U.S. Customs came out and said, and let me explain how solar panels are put together. They're pretty much all assembled in China. What matters is the silicon wafers and where those are made. And when you import solar panels, you submit paperwork that says these solar panels, the silicon comes from Germany, Japan, South Korea, China, etc. And different countries have different tariff rates. The lowest tariff rate is about 25%. So that's a pretty meaningful adder. If it comes from China, the tariff rate was 275%. That is very meaningful, right? Well, here's the game everyone played. The company making the solar panels once a year goes and buys a pallet of wafers from Germany, and every solar panel they sell for the next year has that same form of purchase of wafers, and all the wafers actually are coming from China, but they're doing the 25 or 45% tariff to reduce the costs, bring them into the U.S. Well, U.S. Customs came out and said, we know you guys are lying, and we're going to start an investigation, and we're going to, someone's going to bend over and take it. Immediately, 80% of imported solar panels disappeared. So the supply chain right now is worse than baby food formula because everyone knew they were cheating. They didn't want to get caught, so they tried to hide while Customs is doing this game. 8 weeks later, maybe 10 weeks later, our glorious president comes out and says, I'm going to declare an energy crisis, and I can't make this up. And my emergency declaration, I'm going to eliminate all tariffs on solar equipment coming into the U.S. to drop the price so people can afford to buy their solar panels. So in other words, he kneecapped the Customs Department. So what I'm waiting for is these solar manufacturers. If I was one of them, I'd pack every ship I can, fill them up with solar panels, and get them over here, because the minimum before was 25%. That's zero, or until the emergency is undeclared.
Yeah, you start dumping the supply.
Exactly. So at some point, I'm expecting solar panels to drop to, maybe 25, 30 cents per watt again, almost a half price of where they are today. Now, I've been watching, and the supplies are still extremely thin. It was a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago, when Biden came out with this announcement. So things may still be in transition, but we're not quite there yet. So if, my guidance would be, watch this stuff, and when you see the big price drop, jump in, because God knows how long this will be ongoing.
So I thought Canadian Solar, where we're getting my panels, I was pretty sure they were being manufactured in Canada. That's what I thought when I did my research.
They might be. I don't know. I couldn't. There's a bunch of companies out there, and in solar panels, they have now, the big thing is bifacial, and that means if it's facing the sun, it absorbs light and produces electricity. Any light that comes from behind, it also absorbs, but only at like a 10 or 15% rate. But they charge an extra 10 or 15 cents per watt. You might get 1 or 2 cents of benefits, but that doesn't matter because it's a marketing ploy. This is Cabbage Patch Dolls. So don't get too tricked by.
So is anyone making them in the U.S.?
There were a few companies when Obama was touting it, and most, I think all of them have gone under. Yeah, I think they've all gone under.
Okay.
It's other things to watch for. I mean, you want the traditional solar panel glass front aluminum frames. Some people make panels that are don't have a frame around them. Some of them, it's more of an epoxy, or there's a thin film. I've seen panels as cheap as brand new 12 cents per watt. And the problem is the silicon can't dissipate the heat, and they typically last about 1 year before they die. So,
mine are all aluminum framed, and I think they're about 5 feet, 5.5 feet by maybe 32 or 37 inches wide. I forget exactly. 120 cell units. So,
another thing to factor in is there's different dimensions for solar panels. When you're doing an array, get them all the same size. Save yourself the headache of trying to. You don't want the 56-inch and the 59-inch because you're gonna just hate yourself. And having some extras, when one goes out, you can switch it out.
That's a good point.
It's a plus.
I'm going to need to drop. This has been good. I learned a bunch of stuff mostly, but I need to look a little bit more at the solar arc and decide what the biggest inverter I can get up front that makes the most sense. But as I said, I don't mind growing into it, but I also don't want to get a bunch of small ones and just end up with a whole wall full of inverters. So, well, my plan, by the way, is my panels are going to be, like I said, in different buildings anyway. So my thought is, I'm going to have a small inverter maybe in the shop, which has a 100-watt, 100-amp box, and put those into there, and put a small inverter there, and put the carport one. So that's why I was originally thinking of a bunch of different inverters, right? Just to feed into the whole system that way, and then put the batteries on the inverter that's at the house and let it provide the power there. So I'll have to draw it on paper. See what I come up with.
I know with the Solarcs, they've got the 5, 8, 12, 15 kilowatts, and it's kind of funny. It's like $1,000 increment. So the 5 kilowatt is about $5,000. The 8 kilowatt is $6,000. The 12 kilowatt is like $7,500. The 15 kilowatt is about $9,000. So as you scale up, it is a better value.
Yeah,
Moving
makes
upward.
sense.
And something like you said, just having one battery on there. Now, something you can look at is where your critical electronic equipment is. If you take your breaker panel, and this will take some wiring, but let's say your internet, your computer,
Mhm.
maybe a light circuit or two, a ceiling fan, move all of those over to a separate breaker panel. And
Yeah, that's what I was going to do. Actually, I was going to have,
yeah,
I was going to get a 10 circuit panel that has electronic transfer. I found a couple of them that transfer instantly. Like, but by the way, in my computer room at home, I already have 3,000 watts of UPS with
mhm,
basically the routers, the Wi-Fi hotspot, the POI devices for all the cameras and stuff like that. So that stays online on its own, whether I like it or not. It's mostly things like the four refrigerators, the HVAC system for our friggin' hot days, the well pump, which is our backup to the city water, and a few things like that. So
yep. Now keep in mind, like the Solarc, it has a
Mhm.
built-in transfer switch. So some of these, things that you talked about getting
True,
externally,
but they
that's one.
don't have the separate panel like I'm talking about. I'm talking about. We have those mini panels you
Oh,
with about.
so let me explain.
Mhm.
Here's how I would wire it in your situation. From your breaker panel,
Yeah.
put a single breaker going to the Solarc. From the Solarc, come out to this
Oh, I
mini breaker
see.
panel,
Got it. So
and
put
then
like a
everything
60 amp
routes to
breaker
that.
or 80 amp breaker, whatever the rating is based on what
Exactly.
the output watts, and have that go to the sub panel, put all the, yeah. You're right. Actually, I never, that makes perfect sense. Okay. That makes
Yeah.
sense. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, one more thing I'm going to add,
Mhm.
and I would do one of these at every breaker panel you've got. Lowe's, Home Depot, you have to order
Surge.
them online because surge protectors.
Yeah.
They look like a relay
Yeah.
cube,
Yeah. I have one.
and
Well, I
wire
have it
them
on
in
my
everywhere.
shop actually, but I meant to add one to the rest of the house because,
I'd
I'd be
put
able to
one
kind
at the pole.
of,
I'd do one per breaker box,
yeah. Yeah, I have one on my
and
shop
just
because the split HVAC out there didn't want to get it fried. Yeah, they're great.
yeah. I mean, my brother's house got hit by lightning a couple of years ago,
Yeah,
and it was
my
about
neighbor
$5,000.
Choppy across the street, they got hit and he lost so many electronics. It just fried everything. It was crazy.
Yeah, those little things are like $50.
Mhm.
Get a few of them; it'll be the best insurance you will ever have gotten, even without solar.
Okay.
I'd
Well,
recommend it.
that's actually great advice. Anybody should do that, and they're not expensive. I did the one in the shop. I guess I could put one on the 200 amp service in the house here too. So
Yep.
That
And they have. There's a question.
I gotta go, guys. I'm sorry, I gotta drop off. Thank you for staying on longer. It's great. I'll see you guys online. We need, you should create a group in Facebook, a Facebook group, put people in it. So
Oh,
chat doesn't get
I
lost.
don't want to. Yeah, I don't want to work that hard. I don't need another job. I've already got two businesses.
All right. Yeah, we got to talk about bees someday too, because I have ag exemption everywhere but my house. My house is on 5 acres. I was told I need 6
Need 6.
acres for the bee exempt, right? So Chris, you're muted.
I just found out that there's a court case somewhere else in Texas where your 5 acres,
Uh-huh.
you're allowed to double dip your homeowner
Ooh,
exemption and ag.
nice.
So they have to,
I
even
was
if you have a
wondering
house,
when
they're
that
supposed
was
to take
gonna.
5 acres. And supposedly it went to the appeals court and it was upheld. So now it's supposed to be case law.
Can you send that link if you guys? I'd love to see
I
that link.
will go and look
Yeah,
for it.
I'd like
Yeah.
to see that as well.
Because like I
mean,
said, I'm trying to buy 2 acres off my neighbor, because it's like tax like 4,600 out here, but I think they'll drop significantly. If it's like my 18 acres on Merck, I pay $30 a year for ag, with ag. So
Yeah.
And I have a lot of bees
Yeah.
around here, by the way. My garden this morning, I was out there, maybe it's because of all the
Where's your
watering
property?
on 1179 out in Steep Hollow, right across from Choppy, Chops Auto, he has pigs and stuff.
Okay. Because I've got hives out, but they're on Riley Road. They're out past you.
There's a lot of, I have land on Riley as well, or we have family land on Riley, right across
Okay.
from Mr. Riley. We have 50 acres there too.
Okay.
But
Well,
yeah, I got a lot of bees
kind
in
of
my
close to
garden.
where it runs into Grassburg.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm right at Steep Hollow Circle, so about 3 miles, a mile past Frank's, actually, if you know where Frank's is.
Oh yeah, I know where Frank's.
Yeah, mile past Frank's, a big concrete circle driveway, wooden fence.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Actually, that Brian, that's where you live too, right? Brian, you live out at Steep Hollow? Brian Cahill, did you freeze?
No, you froze for a minute.
Oh, you live out at Steep Hollow too, right?
Past Steep Hollow, a little farther down than Sinai, Grasper.
On Grassburg.
Oh, yeah. So you're a couple miles past us.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but yeah, so I'd love to get some bees out here. We got a lot of wooded areas. We got a lot of wildflowers in the pasture area where the horses are. So
Talk to me later on about the bee school in September.
yeah, that'd be great. And honestly, if it worked like ag exemption, I'll let you put bees and you can have the bees. I just want the ag exempt. You can have the honey.
I rent hives.
Yeah.
Well, as long as they're cheaper
Yep.
than the yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I took over your call.
Yeah.
Anyways, I got to
we'll-
drop. Let's talk bees again. Send me
Okay.
the invite. So thank you. Thank you, Tony, for
All
that.
right. Thank you.
This is
All right.
awesome.
How many slides have you not gotten
Questions?
to yet, Tony?
I think we've covered them all.
Oh, really?
So
Okay.
I know we're way over. And gosh, it looks like it's just us and Brian. I guess the
Yeah.
ladies dropped off as well.
Well, I know that
Brian,
there's several
kick
people
in.
that were going to watch the video after I get it posted.
Yep. I mean, we had some good side conversations. Hopefully, we didn't get too technical for everyone to. I'm sure there's things that not everyone quite kept up with, but what I wanted to be able to say was, and like he and I went back and forth. Your specific application is going to need a specific strategy that makes it best. Just like at the end
Right.
when I was telling him, how to wire your breaker box, and it's kind of going those head thumps. Well, why did I think of that? That's so simple. But the bottom line is that at the simplest of systems, you can make your money back in 4 or 5 years. Which, I can tell you electric rates are going nowhere but up. Well, either they're going straight up or upward or straight down. Because, like I keep joking, everyone's going to buy an electric car and destroy the grid. I didn't say this early on. I don't mean this as a scare tactic, but it's bottom line truth. In Europe, England, Germany, etc., electric rates are 2, 3, 4, 5 times what they were just a couple of years ago. Now they've got a natural gas problem and Russia and yada yada yada.
Yeah.
But electric rates in the U.S. this last year are up, I think, 15%. And there's a lot of arguing about all that stuff. So all of these numbers are based on the 9, 10, 11 cents per watt that we're paying today. If you add even 25% to that, my 4.5 years is going to turn into 3.5 years payback time.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know of anyone that thinks electric rates are going downward. So, this is one of these things where if you're going to move, no, don't do this. This is, not good use of your time. But if you're planning on staying in your house, look at taking your electric bill to zero, or something significantly lower. And trust me, you can think that, this will get me 80% there, and all of a sudden your wife is going to take up hot glue hobbies, and your electric bill is going to go up 20%.
Yeah. Power requirements never go down either.
Yep.
Everybody wants more.
Your like I said, your air conditioner gets less efficient. Your windows get more leaky. More, of course, now we've gone to LED lights, so we've minimized that. But they're going to be left on, and more motion lights because crime is up, and just all of the electric fence because crime's up, and electric stun guns because crime is up. But you see my point. It's the pay me now or pay me a lot more later. And I'm one of these Dave Ramsey guys that I'm against borrowing money anymore. If I can pay my electric bill 100% right now, and never have another electric bill, that's what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Plus, I'm doing the battery backup where I don't trust the grid. Now everyone has to make their own decision in terms of how much they trust it. But
Well,
just
you did convince me just by looking at the different options that I think a hybrid is the better way for me to go.
yeah, you're going to spend a little bit more for the inverter units.
Yeah, but
Your batteries are going to be the question mark, and a lot of these inverters. I didn't get this.
oh,
in the
I
previous
had a question about that, and I was going to ask you, how hard is it to expand on something later? Like,
So that's the wonderful thing. If you've got and I'll throw it a couple of ways at you. You can get one of those hybrid systems with no batteries. If everything goes, let's say the alarm is deep freezes are coming next Tuesday, expect power losses. Take 4 batteries out of your car, your tractor, your wife's car, because you're not driving anywhere anyways, and hook them up. You get 48 volts out of it. Set up your inverter to match that battery, and you can literally run with car batteries. Now, it's not optimal
yeah,
by any means, but in a pinch, it's going to do a whole lot more for your refrigeration and some lights and, maybe a ceiling fan or even a window air conditioning unit
yeah,
than nothing. And like he and I were just talking, these lithium, if you want to go with the lithium ion batteries, which that really is a good technology, or the LiFePos, they kind of start in the $1,500 range. And that sounds like a lot, but you can get one battery today. And if you want a battery every year for your birthday or Christmas, it's a couple of cables, hook it up, expand your system, and
so if the grid goes down, how long? Let's say that I'm running. Well, I'll just use your example of 30 kilowatt hours per day. How long can you run on a battery at that usage?
Okay. So that example was 30 kilowatts on average per day.
Right.
So let me do a realistic scenario. And let's say whether it's a hurricane or a freeze or whatever, and let's say your normal 30 kilowatts, immediately you need to turn off a few things.
Yeah.
Turn off your water heater. Don't use the dryer. Don't use your electric stove. If you need to run some AC, that might be your biggest load. But you're mostly doing fans, lights, so your 30 kilowatts.
Food.
Yeah, you're going to cut that in half, maybe even 2/3.
Okay.
Because you're doing the basic essentials, right? So your 30 kilowatts is going to become, let's say, 10 kilowatts a day.
Okay.
All right. One of these $1,500 batteries is about 5,000 watts. So that one battery would run you 12 hours.
Okay.
Now, the reality is you're going to have more than, because that's not a very big battery.
But that's also assuming you're not getting any sunlight to charge the battery with your solar.
Well, let's address that. Let me approach that. If I'm looking at, let me go to the example. So this hybrid system. In this system, I said 8 kilowatts of solar. Okay. This system on an average day is going to produce 40 kilowatts. Yeah, call it 35 kilowatts. If it is cloudy and overcast, let's say you only produce 10% of that, which, there's not a lot of days you're going to be below that. But, drop that from 35, 90% off the top, that's 3,500 watt hours. Well, that 3,500 plus the 5,000 of the battery, that would get you through one pretty big day.
Yeah.
Nearly. And, it only takes, again, in this situation, 8 kilowatts. If you had 1 hour at noon that the sun comes out, that is pretty much 8 kilowatts of power. So if you get an hour 15 of sunlight that day, only that much that day, that would give you 10 kilowatts and keep up with, that basic need.
Okay.
And of course, you can monitor things and say, all right, hon, we have to turn this or that off, because you want to keep the fridge, freezer running. Those are the things that, for most of us, if your chest freezer goes out and you lose electricity for 2 or 3 days, there goes $1,000. And I mean, you look at that and say, shoot, I could have bought almost another battery for what I lost in meat. And $1,000 with the old prices for beef. I'm afraid to ask
Oh,
how
yeah.
much my yeah. That's another discussion. But and these are just, and I don't mean to say this as scare tactics. I've said that repeatedly, although a lot of people take it that way. But no one argues that the grid is less reliable than ever. Storms are here just like always. I'll give you a worst case scenario. My wife's best friend lives outside of New Orleans. And when Katrina hit, she stayed at the house. Her husband was with New Orleans EMS. So he pretty much was living at the firehouse. But she was in her house alone without electricity for about 3 months. And it has had effects even 10 years later that, she can't sleep without a light on. Because it's going back to, flashbacks to all of that. But she had to stay in the house because of all the crime and so forth. So that's just,
Okay.
some
Well,
different.
I'll tell you what, how close do you think you are to being done with the thing for the recording?
How close am I to being done with what?
Well, recording this, I'm wondering,
Yeah.
I mean, we're just having discussion now, right?
Right. Oh, yeah. I mean, you
Okay.
can cut it off at any
All
point.
right.
I'm
I'll
assuming
cut the
you don't